The question that saved a life. The 12-year-old girl collapsed against the fence post, her vision blurring as snow began to fall across the Wyoming wheat fields. 3 days without food, 2 nights sleeping in abandoned barns. One decision away from simply lying down in the cold and never getting up again. When the horseman's shadow fell across her frozen body, Lena Holloway didn't even have the strength to run. But then Caleb Turner asked the question that would change everything. Did you eat today? In that moment, between one heartbeat and the next, a lost child's fate hung in the balance of a stranger's kindness. Welcome to a story of survival, second chances, and the family we choose. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far Lena's journey travels. Now, let's begin. The November wind cut across the Wyoming territory like a knife through butter, carrying with it the promise of the hard winter to come. Lena Holloway had stopped feeling the cold sometime around midday. Now, as the sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, she felt only a peculiar lightness, as if her body no longer quite belonged to her. Her fingers, blue-white and trembling, clutched the rough wood of the fence post. Beyond it stretched acres of harvested wheat fields, the stubble poking through the first dusting of snow like whiskers on an old man's face. She'd been following this fence line for hours, putting one foot in front of the other because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant the tears would come again, and she had no strength left for crying. The dress she wore, the only one she owned now, had been pretty once. Her mother had made it 2 summers ago, before the fever took her, before everything fell apart. Now it hung on Lena's thin frame like a sack, the hem torn and muddy, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. Her shoes, too small even when they'd been given to her by the church ladies back in Redemption Gulch, had split along the sides. She could feel every rock, every frozen clump of earth through the holes. "Just a little farther," she whispered to herself, the words crystallizing in the frigid air. "Just to that tree. Then you can rest." But there was always another tree, another fence post, another promise to herself that she'd keep moving just a little bit more. Because stopping meant admitting the truth she'd been running from for 3 days now. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and winter was coming fast. The town of Redemption Gulch lay 2 days' walk behind her. She'd fled it in the gray hours before dawn, slipping out of the barn where she'd been sleeping since Mrs. Hutchins had died. Dear, kind Mrs. Hutchins, who'd taken her in after the orphanage in Denver had sent her west on the charity train. Mrs. Hutchins, who'd promised Lena a home and a future, and then had the misfortune to catch pneumonia and die within a week, leaving Lena alone again at 12 years old with winter coming on. The good people of Redemption Gulch had tried, in their way. The Reverend's wife had brought her a basket of bread. The school teacher had offered sympathy and prayer, but when it came to actually taking in another mouth to feed, a girl too young to earn her keep properly, too old to be adopted like a baby might be, well, that was another matter entirely. They all had their own troubles, their own children, their own worries about making it through the hard months ahead. So Lena had made the decision herself. She'd left before they could send her back to Denver, back to the orphanage where children disappeared into factory work, or worse. She'd head south, she'd told herself. Maybe find ranch work, and maybe find a town that needed help. Maybe find something, anything, that would give her a reason to keep breathing. But 3 days of walking had taught her the harsh mathematics of frontier survival. No food except what she could scavenge from abandoned campsites or the charity of the one farm wife who'd given her half a loaf of bread yesterday. No shelter except barns and the overhang of rocks. No warmth except what she could generate by walking, always walking, until her legs trembled and her vision swam, and her empty stomach cramped so hard she had to stop and curl into herself until the pain passed. The fence post was smooth under her hand, worn by years of weather. She leaned against it, letting it take her weight. Her eyes drifted closed, just for a moment, just to rest. The sound of hooves on frozen ground didn't register at first. Then a horse snorted somewhere close, and Lena's eyes snapped open, her heart suddenly racing. She tried to straighten, to look presentable, to not appear as desperate as she felt. But her legs had other ideas, and she sagged against the fence, one hand clutching the post to keep from falling. The rider came around the curve of the fence line, a man on a sturdy bay gelding, his coat collar turned up against the wind, his hat pulled low. He sat his horse like someone who'd been born in a saddle, easy and confident. As he drew closer, Lena could make out more details. Weathered face, probably 35 or 40, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting into the sun. Work-roughened hands on the reins. The practical dress of a working rancher. No fancy fringe or silver conchos, just durable canvas and wool. He reined in his horse a few feet away, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. Lena tried to read his face. Was he angry that she was on his land? Would he chase her off? Call the law? Her muscles tensed, ready to run, even though she knew she didn't have the strength to make it far. "You're on Turner land," the man said finally. His voice was deep, measured, with the slight drawl of someone who'd spent time in cattle country. Not unkind, but not warm either, just stating a fact. "I'm sorry." Lena's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. She cleared her throat, tried again. "I'm just passing through. I'll move on." She tried to push away from the fence, but her knees buckled. Only her grip on the post kept her upright. The man's eyes narrowed, taking in details. Her torn dress, her inadequate shoes, the way she swayed even standing still. "Where are you headed?" he asked. Lena's mind raced, searching for an answer that wouldn't sound as pathetic as the truth. "South," she said finally. "Got family down south." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The man, Turner, he'd said his name was Turner, tilted his head slightly, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, exactly. Something harder, more calculating. "That's so." It wasn't a question. He shifted in his saddle, and Lena noticed for the first time the rifle scabbard attached to it, the coiled rope, the saddlebags that probably held supplies for a day's work. A working rancher, then, out checking his fence lines before the snow came in earnest. "When did you last eat?" The question struck her like a physical blow. Of all the things she'd expected him to ask, where she'd come from, what she was doing, why she was trespassing, that hadn't been on the list. Her throat tightened, and she felt the treacherous heat of tears building behind her eyes. "I'm fine," she managed. "That wasn't what I asked." His voice remained level, but there was something in his eyes now, a sharpness, an attention that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't been since her mother died. "When did you eat?" Lena's fingers tightened on the fence post. She could lie again, should lie again. But the truth was pushing up through her chest, fighting to get out, and she was so tired of carrying it alone. "Yesterday morning," she whispered. "A farm wife gave me bread." The silence that followed felt enormous. Turner sat motionless on his horse, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Lena waited for judgment, for dismissal, for the inevitable turning away that every adult had mastered when confronted with a problem they didn't want to solve. Instead, Turner dismounted in one smooth motion. He was tall, she realized, over 6 feet, with the broad shoulders and lean build of a man who earned his living through physical labor. He moved toward her, and Lena instinctively shrank back against the fence. He stopped immediately, hands held slightly away from his body, not threatening, just standing there, waiting. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, "but you look about ready to fall over. When I say you last ate yesterday morning, I'm guessing that means nothing today. Nothing last night either." Lena's jaw trembled. She clenched it, refusing to let the weakness show. "I said I'm fine. And I'm saying you're not." He glanced at the sky where the clouds were thickening, promising more snow. "How old are you? 14? Another lie, but one she'd learned made people less worried. 12 sounded too young, too vulnerable. His eyebrow raised slightly. "Try again." The tears came then, hot and shameful, spilling down her frozen cheeks before she could stop them. 12, she choked out. "I'm 12. Turner's expression didn't change much, just a slight tightening around his eyes, a muscle working in his jaw. He looked back at his horse, then at Lena, then at the darkening sky. She could almost see him calculating, weighing options, making decisions in the practical way of a man used to solving problems. "My ranch house is about a mile west," he said finally. "My wife's there. She's got supper on by now, I'd wager. Pot roast, if I know Eleanor. Maybe potatoes. Definitely fresh bread. You could eat with us." Lena stared at him, searching for the catch. There was always a catch. Kindness always came with strings attached. She'd learned that the hard way. "I don't take charity," she said, lifting her chin with what little pride she had left. "Didn't offer charity." Turner's lips quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Offered supper. You can pay for it by helping my wife with the dishes after. That sound fair?" It sounded like heaven. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded like every trap she'd been warned about by the older girls at the orphanage, the ones who'd learned that kindness from strangers often led to places worse than hunger. But the alternative was another night in the cold with nothing in her belly. Another day of walking toward a destination that didn't exist. Another step closer to lying down in the snow and not getting back up. "Just supper," she said, hating how desperate she sounded. "And dishes. Nothing else." Something flickered across Turner's face. Understanding, maybe, or sadness. "Just supper," he agreed. "And dishes. You have my word." He moved back to his horse and pulled himself into the saddle with easy grace. Then he held his hand down to her. "You're too tired to walk. Ride with me." Lena looked at that outstretched hand for a long moment. Everything in her screamed to refuse, to keep her distance, to maintain what little independence she had left. But her legs were shaking, her vision was going gray at the edges, and the snow was starting to fall harder. She reached up and took his hand. The front door opened, spilling more light across the porch. A woman appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. She was younger than Turner, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of face that looked like it smiled often. Those smiles had left creases at the corners of her eyes, the good kind that spoke of laughter rather than worry. "Caleb Turner, you'd better not be bringing work to my supper table," she called, but there was warmth in her voice. Then she caught sight of Lena, and her expression shifted. "Oh, my stars!" Eleanor Turner crossed the yard in quick strides, and before Lena could react, the woman had dropped to her knees in front of her, hands reaching out but not quite touching, as if afraid Lena might bolt. "You poor thing," Eleanor breathed. Her eyes took in everything, the torn dress, the inadequate shoes, the way Lena swayed with exhaustion. "Caleb, what happened?" "Found her by the south fence line," Turner said, leading his horse toward the barn. "She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning." Eleanor's face transformed with a flash of something fierce and protective. "Well, we're fixing that right now. Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you inside where it's warm." She rose and held out her hand, and this time Lena didn't hesitate. Eleanor's hand was smaller than her husband's, but just as strong, and she led Lena toward the house with gentle determination. The warmth hit Lena the moment she stepped through the door. Heat from the cast-iron stove, heat from the fireplace, heat that soaked into her frozen bones, and made her suddenly aware of just how cold she'd been. The room swam for a moment, and she felt Eleanor's arm around her shoulders, supporting her. "Easy now," Eleanor murmured. "Let's get you to the table. Can you sit?" Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. Eleanor guided her to a chair. A real chair. At a real table, in a real house that smelled like home. And Lena sank into it gratefully. The kitchen was simple but well kept, with cheerful curtains at the windows and shelves lined with preserves and dry goods. A pot bubbled on the stove, sending up steam and the scent that had nearly brought Lena to her knees outside. Eleanor moved with practiced efficiency, ladling soup into a bowl, real beef soup, rich and dark, and setting it in front of Lena along with a thick slice of bread already spread with butter. "Start with this," she said. "Slow sips. Your stomach's been empty too long for you to rush." Lena stared at the food. Her hand shook as she picked up the spoon. The first taste of the soup, hot and savory and more delicious than anything she remembered, brought fresh tears to her eyes. She tried to eat slowly, like Eleanor had said, but it was so hard when every cell in her body screamed for more, more, more. Eleanor settled into the chair across from her, watching with eyes that missed nothing. "What's your name, honey?" "Lena." It came out thick around a mouthful of bread. She swallowed, tried to remember her manners. "Lena Holloway, ma'am." "Lena. That's a pretty name." Eleanor's voice was soft, non-threatening. "Where are you from, Lena?" The question Lena had been dreading. She set down her spoon, her appetite warring with the need to be honest with this woman who'd shown her nothing but kindness. "Redemption Gulch, ma'am. About 2 days north." Long way to walk. Eleanor paused. Especially for someone traveling alone. Where's your family? The old wound opened fresh. Dead, ma'am. My mama and papa died of fever 2 years back. I was in an orphanage in Denver till last spring when they put me on the train out here. Mrs. Hutchins in Redemption Gulch took me in, but she... Lena's voice cracked. She died 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia. Eleanor's hand moved across the table, covering Lena's. The touch was gentle, warm, and Lena had to blink hard to keep the tears at bay. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. That's a lot of loss for someone so young. The door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and Caleb Turner. He'd stabled his horse and brushed off the snow, and now he moved to the stove to warm his hands. His eyes found Lena at the table, took in the half-empty bowl, and something in his expression eased. She keeping the food down? He asked Eleanor. So far. Eleanor rose to fix her husband a bowl. Caleb, she's from Redemption Gulch. Been walking for 2 days. Caleb's jaw tightened. In this weather. Had nowhere else to go, Lena said quietly. She didn't want them to think she was stupid or reckless. Thought I'd head south, maybe find work. At 12 years old. Caleb took his bowl from Eleanor and sat at the head of the table. Doing what exactly? Lena lifted her chin. I can work. I'm stronger than I look. I can clean, cook, mend, help with animals. I worked for Mrs. Hutchins, did everything she asked. I don't doubt it. Caleb's tone wasn't mocking, just matter of fact. But winter's coming on hard, and a 12-year-old girl alone on the frontier. He shook his head. That's not a safe situation. Didn't have a safe situation. The words came out sharper than Lena intended. Had to make do with what I had. Caleb and Eleanor exchanged a look across the table, one of those married looks that carried entire conversations in the space of a glance. Lena had seen her parents do the same thing back when they were alive. The memory hurt. Lena, Eleanor said gently, where were you planning to sleep tonight? The question hung in the air. Lena looked down at her bowl, at the soup she'd nearly finished, and felt shame burn through her. I'd have found somewhere, a barn, maybe. I've been managing. It's going to snow hard tonight, Caleb said. Already coming down thick, temperatures dropping fast. A barn might not be enough. Lena knew that. Had known it when she'd left Redemption Gulch, had felt it in her bones as she walked. But admitting it meant admitting defeat, and she'd fought too hard to give up now. I'll manage, she repeated stubbornly. Eleanor's chair scraped as she stood and moved around the table. She crouched beside Lena's chair, bringing their eyes level. Sweetheart, you don't have to manage alone anymore. Not tonight. We have a spare room upstairs. It's small, but it's warm and has a real bed. You could stay the night, get a good sleep, have breakfast in the morning. The offer was almost painful in its kindness. Lena wanted to accept so badly it made her chest ache, but the voice of hard experience whispered warnings in her mind. And then what? You send me back to Redemption Gulch? Back to the orphanage in Denver? No, Caleb's voice was firm. That's not how we do things here. But Eleanor's right. It's too dangerous for you to travel tonight. Stay, rest. Tomorrow we can figure out what comes next. Together, Eleanor added, her hand finding Lena's again. You don't have to carry this alone. Lena looked between them. These strangers who'd shown her more genuine care in an hour than she'd received in weeks. Caleb's steady, serious face. Eleanor's warm, open expression. The comfortable home they'd built together, the life they'd carved out of the harsh frontier. Just tonight, she whispered. Eleanor smiled, and it transformed her whole face. Just tonight, she agreed. Now, let's get some more food in you, and then we'll get you cleaned up and into bed. When's the last time you had a proper bath? Lena couldn't remember. The days had blurred together into cold and hunger and fear. A while, she admitted. Then that's what we'll do. Eleanor stood, already moving toward the stove to heat water. Caleb, can you bring up the tub from the storage room? And we'll need... I know what we need. Caleb rose, and Lena caught the small smile he gave his wife, full of affection and understanding. Been married to you long enough to know your rescue operations, Eleanor. Don't be smart, Eleanor said, but she was smiling too. Go on now. This child needs tending. As Caleb disappeared toward the back of the house, Eleanor returned to the table with the pot of soup. Now, Let's get you properly fed. You're going to need your strength. Lena ate slowly this time, savoring each bite, letting the warmth spread through her body. Through the window, she could see the snow falling heavier now, blanketing the yard in white. If she'd still been out there, walking through the darkness. She pushed the thought away and focused on the present, the warm kitchen, the food in her belly. Eleanor humming softly as she prepared bath water. It was simple, just a bed, a dresser, a window with curtains. But it was clean and warm, and the bed looked softer than anything Lena had slept on in months. Get some rest, Eleanor said softly. If you need anything in the night, our room's just down the hall. Don't hesitate to call out. She left the lamp burning low and closed the door part way. Lena stood in the middle of the room, still wrapped in the towel, listening to Eleanor's footsteps fade down the hall. Then she moved to the bed and sat carefully on the edge, half expecting it to disappear like a dream. But it didn't disappear. It was real. The soft mattress, the clean sheets, the weight of the quilt. Lena slipped on the nightgown Eleanor had left, drowning in its folds, and crawled under the covers. For the first time in 3 days, in 3 weeks if she was honest, she felt safe. The tears came then, silent and hot, soaking into the pillow. She cried for her parents, for Mrs. Hutchins, for the fear and loneliness of the past weeks. She cried for the child she'd been before loss had hardened her, and for the uncertain future that still loomed ahead. But underneath the grief, there was something else. Something fragile but growing stronger with each breath of warm air, each moment of being cared for. Hope. Downstairs she could hear the murmur of voices, Caleb and Eleanor talking in tones too low to make out words, probably discussing her, deciding what to do with the stray child they'd taken in. Lena knew she should be worried, should be planning her next move, but exhaustion was pulling her down like an undertow. Her last conscious thought, as sleep finally claimed her, was of Caleb Turner's question. Did you eat today? 4 words that had changed everything. 4 words that had led her here, to warmth and safety, and the possibility of something more. 4 words that might, just might, have saved her life. The smell of bacon woke her. Lena's eyes opened slowly, her mind still foggy with the kind of deep sleep she hadn't experienced in weeks. For a moment she didn't recognize the room, the clean white curtains, the way morning light filtered through them in soft patterns across the floor, the weight of an actual quilt instead of her thin coat. Then memory flooded back, and with it, a spike of panic. She sat up too quickly, her heart racing. The Turner's house. She'd stayed the night. She'd accepted their help. And now morning had come, which meant decisions had to be made, futures had to be determined, and the temporary safety of last night would dissolve into the harsh reality of what came next. Her clothes, washed and dried, she realized with a jolt, lay folded on the dresser. Someone had come in while she slept, had taken her filthy dress and mended the worst of the tears, had cleaned her inadequate shoes as best as could be managed. The kindness of it made her throat tight. She dressed quickly, her fingers clumsy with nerves, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was bright with morning sun, and Eleanor stood at the stove, her back to the stairs. She wore a simple work dress with an apron tied around her waist, her dark hair already escaping its pins and wisps that caught the light. She was humming something low and melodic, a tune Lena didn't recognize. "Good morning," Lena said quietly, not wanting to startle her. Eleanor turned with a smile that seemed genuine, unforced. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, ma'am. Better than I have in a long time." Lena hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, unsure where to stand, what to do with her hands. "Thank you for washing my clothes." "Of course. I hope you don't mind. I did a bit of mending too. That dress has seen some hard miles." Eleanor gestured to the table. "Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready. Caleb's out checking on the livestock, but he'll be in soon." Lena sat in the same chair as last night, watching Eleanor move around the kitchen with easy efficiency. The bacon sizzled in the pan, and Eleanor cracked eggs into another skillet with practiced movements. Through the window, Lena could see the yard blanketed in fresh snow. At least 6 inches had fallen overnight, maybe more, if she'd still been out there. "Storm came in hard," Eleanor said, following her gaze. "Caleb said another hour and the drifts would have been too deep for the horse to manage easily. You were lucky he found you when he did." Lucky. Was that what it was? Or something else? Fate? Providence? The universe's way of saying she'd suffered enough for a while? The door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and Caleb Turner. He stamped snow from his boots and hung his coat and hat by the door with the same methodical care he seemed to apply to everything. His eyes found Lena at the table, and he gave a small nod. "Morning. You look better than you did yesterday." "Thank you, sir, for letting me stay." "Caleb," he corrected, moving to wash his hands at the basin. "We're not formal folks here, and you don't need to thank me for basic human decency." Eleanor set plates on the table, eggs and bacon, toast with butter and jam, even a small glass of milk. Real milk, fresh and cold. Lena's stomach growled audibly, and Eleanor laughed, a warm sound that filled the kitchen. "Eat up," she said. "Growing girls need proper fuel." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Lena tried to pace herself, to not appear as desperate as she felt, but the food was so good, so abundant, that it was hard to maintain restraint. She caught Caleb and Eleanor exchanging another one of those looks, and her stomach clenched with anxiety that had nothing to do with hunger. "Lena," Caleb said finally, setting down his fork. His tone was gentle but serious, the voice of a man about to discuss difficult truths. "We need to talk about your situation." Here it came, the inevitable conversation about what happened next, where she would go, how they would shuffle her off to someone else's problem. Lena set down her own fork, her appetite suddenly gone, and met his eyes with as much courage as she could muster. "I understand, Sir Caleb. You've been more than kind, but you didn't sign up for taking in strays. I can leave after breakfast, head south like I planned." "In 6 inches of snow?" Eleanor's voice was sharp. "Absolutely not." "Eleanor's right," Caleb said. "That's not safe, and I won't have it on my conscience, but beyond that—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "We've been talking, Eleanor and I, about you, about your circumstances, about what options you might have." Lena's hands twisted together in her lap, hidden beneath the table. "I told you, I can work. I'm not asking for charity. If you need help around the ranch, I can earn my keep until spring, and then I'll move on. I won't be a burden." "That's not—" Caleb stopped, rubbed a hand over his face. "You're 12 years old. You shouldn't have to earn your survival." "Well, I do." The words came out harder than Lena intended. "That's just how it is. I don't have parents anymore. I don't have anyone. So I work, or I starve. Those are my options." The silence that followed felt heavy. Eleanor's eyes had gone bright with unshed tears, and even Caleb's weathered face showed something that might have been pain. "What if there was another option?" Eleanor asked softly. Lena's heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" Eleanor glanced at Caleb, who gave a small nod, and she reached across the table to take Lena's hand. "What if you stayed here? Not as hired help, not as charity, as family." The word hit Lena like a physical blow. Family. She stared at Eleanor, then at Caleb, searching their faces for the joke, the catch, the inevitable disappointment. But they looked serious, almost nervous, as if they were the ones who might be rejected. "I don't understand," Lena whispered. Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Eleanor and I, we've been married 8 years. We always hoped for children, but—" He paused, and Eleanor squeezed his hand. "It hasn't happened for us. We've made our peace with that, mostly. Built a good life here. But there's always been something missing. When Caleb brought you in last night," Eleanor continued, her voice thick with emotion, "when I saw you standing there, so brave and so scared and so desperately trying to hold yourself together, something just clicked into place, like maybe this was meant to be. Maybe you needed us as much as we needed you." Lena's chest felt too tight, her breathing shallow. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her, orphaned, unwanted, used up by loss and hardship. "You want to adopt me?" "We want to offer you a home," Caleb said carefully. "A place to belong, a place to grow up safe. We can't replace your parents, and we wouldn't try. But we can give you family, if you'll let us." The tears came hot and fast, spilling down Lena's cheeks before she could stop them. She tried to speak, to find words adequate to this impossible, beautiful offer, but all that came out was a sob that she quickly tried to stifle with her hand. Eleanor was around the table in an instant, pulling Lena into her arms. "Oh, sweetheart, it's all right. Let it out. You're safe here." And Lena did. She cried into Eleanor's shoulder, great heaving sobs that came from someplace deep and wounded inside her. She cried for her parents, for all the loss and fear and loneliness of the past 2 years. She cried for the girl she'd been, who'd believed the world was kind, and for the harder, warier girl she'd become. Most of all, she cried because she wanted this so badly it terrified her. Wanted this home, this family, this second chance at the childhood that had been stolen from her. When the storm of tears finally subsided, Eleanor eased back enough to look at Lena's face. She pulled a handkerchief from her apron pocket and gently wiped Lena's cheeks. "You don't have to decide right now," she said softly. "We know this is sudden, overwhelming. Take your time. Think about it." "No." Lena's voice came out rough but determined. "I don't need time. If you're truly offering, if you really mean it, then yes. Please. Yes." The smile that broke across Eleanor's face was incandescent. She looked at Caleb, who'd remained at the table but whose eyes had gone suspiciously bright, and the look they shared was full of joy and relief and something that looked like wonder. "Well then," Caleb said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I guess we're a family." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity and emotion. Eleanor took Lena upstairs to properly settle her into the spare room. "Your room now," she insisted, and they went through the dresser and wardrobe together, taking inventory of what Lena would need. Most of the clothes would have to be made or altered, Eleanor explained, but she had fabric stored away and a good hand with a needle. They could start on a new dress that very afternoon. "I can sew," Lena offered. "Mama taught me before she died. I'm not as good as her, but I can do basic stitching, mending, hemming." "Then we'll work on it together," Eleanor said, and there was such warmth in her voice that Lena felt her chest tighten again with the wonder of being wanted. Downstairs, Caleb had cleared the breakfast dishes and was pulling on his coat again. "Gotta check the south pasture," he said when they came down. "Make sure the cattle found shelter before the storm hit. Eleanor, there's wood stacked on the porch if you need it for the stove." "We'll be fine," Eleanor assured him. She glanced at Lena. "Actually, Lena, do you know how to feed chickens?" "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Hutchins kept chickens. I fed them every morning." "Perfect. We've got about 24 out in the coop. Think you could handle that while I start on the bread dough?" The simple domesticity of the request, the assumption that Lena would contribute not as hired help but as part of the household, made something warm unfurl in her chest. "I'd be happy to." Eleanor found her a coat that was too big but serviceable, and Lena made her way out to the chicken coop through the fresh snow. The birds were huddled in their roosts, fluffed against the cold, but they came alive when she appeared with the feed bucket, clucking and jostling for position. She scattered grain for them and checked their water, moving through the familiar routine with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. When she returned to the house, Eleanor had flour on her hands and was kneading dough at the kitchen table with strong, rhythmic movements. "All settled?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. They're all fine, nice and warm in there." "Good," Eleanor gestured to the basin. "Wash up, and then you can help me with this if you'd like. Or if you'd rather rest, that's fine too. You've had a hard few days." "I'd like to help," Lena said quickly. The idea of being useful, of contributing to this household that had opened its doors to her, felt important, necessary. They worked together in comfortable silence, Eleanor showing Lena how she liked the dough worked, how to test if it had the right consistency. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, and the sun was trying to break through the clouds, sending shafts of light across the white landscape. "Can I ask you something?" Lena ventured after a while. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything." "Why?" The question came out smaller than Lena intended. "I mean, you don't know me. You don't know if I'll be difficult or trouble. Or why would you take that chance?" Eleanor's hands stilled in the dough. She looked at Lena with eyes that were kind but direct. "Because when I was 16, my family's farm failed in Missouri. Drought took everything. My parents died that winter. My father of exhaustion trying to keep us going, my mother of heartbreak a month later. I had 3 younger brothers, and I was the oldest. I had to keep us together, had to find a way to survive." Lena's breath caught. "What did you do?" I found work where I could. Washing, mending, cooking. The boys were too young to do much, but they helped however they could. It was hard, Lena. So hard. And there were nights I didn't think we'd make it. Nights I was so scared and so tired I wanted to just give up. Eleanor's voice went soft with memory. But people helped us. The Reverend's wife gave me sewing work. The general store owner hired my oldest brother to stock shelves. A farmer's widow taught me to preserve food and paid me to help with her canning. They didn't have to do any of that, but they did. They saw children in need and they stepped up. What happened to your brothers? Grew up strong and capable. 2 of them are ranching up in Montana now. The youngest is a school teacher in Kansas City. Eleanor's smile was proud. They've all got good lives, families of their own, because people who didn't owe us anything chose to help when we needed it most. She went back to kneading, her movements sure and practiced. So when Caleb brought you here last night, when I saw that same fear and courage in your eyes that I remember feeling at 16, I knew. We had to help. We had the means, the room, the love to give. How could we not? Lena felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the earlier ones, softer, warmer, full of gratitude instead of grief. I'll try to be worthy of it, she said quietly. I'll work hard, help however I can. I won't be a burden, I promise. Oh, honey, Eleanor set the dough aside and pulled Lena into a flowery hug. You're not a burden, you're a blessing. Do you understand that? A gift we didn't even know to ask for. They held each other for a long moment, and Lena let herself relax into the embrace, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real and lasting and true. The afternoon was spent in companionable work, Eleanor teaching Lena the rhythms of the household, showing her where things were kept, explaining the routines that kept the ranch running. They prepared vegetables for dinner, Eleanor moving with the ease of long practice while Lena absorbed everything, committing it to memory. We keep things simple here, Eleanor explained as she peeled potatoes. Just Caleb and me most of the time, so I don't cook fancy. But I make sure we eat well, good meat, fresh vegetables from the garden in summer, plenty of bread. Caleb works hard, needs fuel to keep going. What kind of ranch is it? Lena asked. Cattle? Mostly. We run about 150 head of beef cattle, sell them in the fall. Caleb's got a good eye for stock, builds the herd carefully. We also keep chickens for eggs, a milk cow, pigs in the spring. It's enough to make a decent living, not enough to make us rich. But we manage. The door opened as Eleanor was sliding a pot roast into the oven, and Caleb stamped in, bringing the smell of cold air and livestock. His face was ruddy from the wind, but his eyes were calm. Cattle are fine, he reported, hanging up his coat. Found them in the shelter of the ridge, right where I expected. Lost count is still at 0, thank goodness. Good. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron. Dinner won't be ready for another hour. You've got time to warm up. Caleb nodded and moved to the fireplace, holding his hands out to the flames. Lena watched him from the kitchen, this quiet man who'd stopped to help a stranger by a fence post, who'd offered more than charity without expecting anything in return. He caught her looking and gave a small smile. You settling in all right? Yes, sir. Eleanor's been teaching me the household routines. Good. Tomorrow, if the weather holds, I'll show you around the ranch proper, teach you about the cattle, the horses, how we manage things here. You'll need to know all of it. The casual assumption that she'd be here long enough to learn these things, that she was worth investing time and knowledge in, made Lena's chest feel tight with emotion again. I'd like that, she managed. That evening, after dinner had been eaten and dishes washed and put away, the 3 of them sat in the front room. Caleb was mending a piece of tack by lamplight, his hands moving with the same steady competence he brought to everything. Eleanor had her sewing basket out and was measuring Lena for a new dress, pins held between her lips as she marked fabric. Hold still, she murmured around the pins. I want to get this right. You're going to need at least 2 good dresses, maybe 3, plus a coat that actually fits you. That old brown wool might work, Caleb offered without looking up from his work. The one your cousin sent that never fit you right. Lena could have it, and you could alter it down. Perfect. I'd forgotten about that one. Eleanor made a note on the paper where she was sketching the pattern. See, Lena? We'll have you properly outfitted in no time. Lena stood still as Eleanor worked, trying not to think about the cost of all this, the fabric, the time, the care, trying not to calculate what she owed these people and whether she could ever repay it. "Stop that," Eleanor said softly, and Lena startled. "Stop what?" "Worrying about owing us. I can see it on your face." Eleanor sat back on her heels, looking up at Lena with gentle firmness. "Family doesn't keep score. Family just helps because that's what family does. Understand?" Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good. Now, I'm thinking a blue calico for this one, and maybe a green gingham for the second. What do you think?" They spent the rest of the evening in quiet companionship, the silence comfortable and warm. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the windows, but inside there was only warmth and safety and the novel sensation of belonging. When Eleanor finally declared it time for bed, Lena climbed the stairs with legs that felt heavy with exhaustion, but a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. She changed into the borrowed nightgown and slipped under the covers, and this time when she closed her eyes, there were no tears. Only gratitude and wonder and the tentative beginning of hope that maybe, just maybe, her luck had finally turned. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the sun glittering off the snow like scattered diamonds. Lena woke to the sound of Caleb's voice outside and Eleanor's answering call from downstairs, and for just a moment she thought she was back in her old life, her parents alive, her world intact. Then full consciousness returned, bringing with it the bittersweet awareness that this was different. Not her old life returned, but a new life beginning. After breakfast, Caleb made good on his promise to show her the ranch. Eleanor bundled Lena into the altered brown coat, which fit well enough after some quick work with needle and thread, and added a knitted scarf and mittens. "Keep warm," she instructed. "And Caleb, don't keep her out too long. She's still recovering her strength." "I'll take care of her," Caleb promised, and the simple certainty in his voice made Lena feel safe in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. They walked the property together, Caleb pointing out the various buildings and features. The barn where he kept his horses, 3 of them, sturdy working animals bred for endurance rather than speed. The cattle shelter where the herd could escape the worst of the weather. The boundaries of the property, marked by fence lines that stretched toward distant horizons. "It's not the biggest spread," Caleb said as they stood on a small rise, looking out over the snow-covered land. "About 500 acres total. But it's good land. Water runs year-round from that creek there, and the grazing is solid. We do all right." "It's beautiful," Lena said, and meant it. The vast expanse of white, the dark line of trees in the distance, the mountains rising beyond. It was harsh and unforgiving, but there was a grandeur to it that took her breath away. "It can be. It can also be brutal." Caleb's voice was matter-of-fact. "Winters are hard here. Summers can be dry. You'll need to be tough to make it, but Eleanor and I will teach you everything you need to know. How to read weather, how to work with animals, how to survive when things get difficult. You willing to learn?" Lena met his eyes, seeing the seriousness there, the genuine question. He was asking if she was committed, if she was ready to be part of this life for real. Not as a guest, not as temporary shelter from a storm, but as family. "I'm willing," she said firmly. "I want to learn. I want to be useful, to contribute. I don't want to just take from you and Eleanor. I want to give back." Something like approval flickered across Caleb's weathered face. "That's good. That's real good. Because here's the truth, Lena. Eleanor and I, we work hard. We don't have hired help except sometimes at branding season. It's just us, doing everything that needs doing. If you're going to be part of this family, you'll work too. Age-appropriate work," he added quickly. "Nothing too heavy or dangerous, but you'll have responsibilities, chores, tasks that are yours to handle. That all right with you?" "More than all right," Lena said. "I like having work to do. Makes me feel, I don't know, useful, I guess." Caleb nodded slowly. "I understand that. Felt the same way when I was your age. Lost my folks young too. Fever took them when I was 14. Went to work on a cattle drive, learned the trade from the ground up. Hard years, but they made me who I am." It was the most personal thing he'd shared with her, and Lena felt honored by the confidence. "Is that how you ended up here?" "More or less. Saved my wages, bought this land when I was 25. Built the house with my own hands, started small with the cattle. Met Eleanor at a church social in town 5 years later and somehow convinced her to take a chance on a rancher with more ambition than sense. He smiled, a rare expression that softened his serious face. Best decision she ever made, marrying me. Or so I like to tell her. I'm sure she agrees, Lena said, and was rewarded with a quiet chuckle. They walked back toward the house, their boots crunching in the snow. As they approached, Eleanor appeared on the porch, waving a dish towel. Lunch is ready, she called. Come warm up. Inside, the house smelled of fresh bread and vegetable soup. They ate together at the kitchen table, and Lena realized with a start that this was the third meal she'd shared with the Turners, the third time she'd sat in this chair and felt like she belonged. 3 meals wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it was more consistent kindness than she'd known in months. This afternoon, Eleanor said as she ladled soup into bowls, I thought we could start on your dresses. I've got the fabric cut, and if we work together, we should be able to get the first one mostly done by dinner. I'd like that, Lena said. Then, gathering her courage, she added, Eleanor, Caleb, I just want to say thank you for everything, for taking me in, for being so kind, for giving me a chance. I know I've said it before, but I want you to know I really mean it. Eleanor reached across the table and took Lena's hand. Sweetheart, you don't have to keep thanking us. You're family now. This is your home as much as it is ours. She's right, Caleb added. You belong here, Lena. The sooner you accept that, the easier it'll be for all of us. Lena looked at them. This couple who'd opened their home and hearts to a stranger, who'd offered her not just shelter but belonging, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. The hard protective shell she'd built around herself over the past 2 years, the armor that had kept her moving forward through loss and fear, began to crack. Maybe it was okay to let her guard down. Maybe it was safe to trust again, to hope again, to believe that good things could last instead of being snatched away. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something permanent and real. I accept it, she said softly. And I promise I'll do everything I can to be worthy of it. You already are, Eleanor said, squeezing her hand. You already are. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural to Lena. Strange because she kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for some condition to be revealed, for the Turners to change their minds about wanting her. Natural because the work itself, the daily tasks of keeping a frontier household running, felt right in her hands, purposeful in a way nothing had since her mother died. She woke each morning to the sound of Caleb moving around downstairs, stoking the fire, preparing to head out to the barn. She'd dress quickly in one of the 2 dresses Eleanor had finished. The blue calico that brought out her eyes, Eleanor had said, or the green gingham that made her look older, more capable. Then she'd go downstairs to help Eleanor with breakfast, learning the particular way she liked the eggs cooked, the exact moment to flip the pancakes, how to make coffee strong enough for Caleb without making it bitter. After breakfast, while Caleb tended the cattle and horses, Lena helped Eleanor with the household chores. There was always something that needed doing, bread to be baked, floors to be swept, laundry to be scrubbed and hung, but Eleanor made it companionable rather than drudgery, singing old songs while they worked, telling stories about her childhood in Missouri, asking Lena questions about her own past in a way that felt like genuine interest rather than prying. Your mother taught you to sew, you said, Eleanor asked one morning as they worked together on mending a pile of Caleb's work shirts. The fabric was worn thin in places, the elbows nearly through, but Eleanor's needle moved with practiced efficiency, reinforcing the weak spots. Yes, ma'am. She was real good at it, made all our clothes, even Papa's Sunday suit. Lena's own stitches were smaller now, neater, improved by Eleanor's patient instruction over the past week. She used to say that a woman who could sew well would never starve, because there was always someone who needed mending done. Smart woman, your mother. Eleanor tied off a thread and reached for another shirt. What else did she teach you? The question opened a door Lena usually kept carefully shut, but something about the quiet morning, the companionable work, made her want to answer. She taught me to read and write, which wasn't common for girls where we lived. Papa thought it was a waste, but Mama insisted, said knowledge was power, and women needed all the power they could get. The memory made her smile despite the ache. She taught me about herbs, too, which ones helped with fever, which ones made good tea, which ones to avoid entirely because they were poison. That's valuable knowledge out here, Eleanor said. Medicine's hard to come by, and the nearest doctor is in Clearwater, 2 days' ride in good weather. Most folks rely on home remedies and prayer. Mama said prayer was fine, but it didn't hurt to help things along with practical knowledge. Lena smoothed the shirt she was working on, remembering her mother's hands doing the same work. She was practical like that, kind, but practical. I would have liked to meet her, Eleanor said softly. She sounds like she raised you well. She tried. Lena's throat tightened. Didn't have enough time to finish the job, I guess. Eleanor set down her mending and reached across to cover Lena's hand with her own. Oh, sweetheart, she did finish. Look at you, brave and strong and capable, surviving things that would break most adults. That's her legacy, living on in you. She'd be so proud. The tears came quickly, unexpectedly, and Lena tried to dash them away with her free hand. I'm sorry, I don't mean to. Don't you dare apologize for missing your mother. Eleanor's voice was fierce now, protective. You cry all you need to. Grief doesn't have a schedule, doesn't follow rules. It comes when it comes, and you let it out. That's healthy. That's human. Don't you ever be ashamed of it. So Lena cried, and Eleanor held her, and when the storm passed, they went back to their mending as if nothing had happened. But something had shifted. Another small piece of the wall around Lena's heart had crumbled away, making room for this new family to settle in. The afternoons were Lena's favorite time. After the midday meal, Eleanor would often send her outside to help Caleb with whatever task he was working on. Sometimes it was mending fence, and he'd show her how to string wire properly, how to set posts so they'd withstand the Wyoming winds. Other times it was working with the horses, and she'd learn to curry them, to check their hooves, to read their moods in the set of their ears and the swish of their tails. Caleb was a patient teacher, never rushing her, never showing frustration when she had to ask him to explain something twice. He had a quiet way of instructing, demonstrating once and then watching while she tried, offering corrections only when necessary. You're a quick study, he said one afternoon as Lena successfully hitched the wagon on her third attempt. Most folks take a dozen tries before they get the hang of it. The praise, understated as it was, made Lena glow with pride. I've been paying attention. I can see that. Caleb checked her work, testing the connections with experienced hands. This'll hold just fine. You did good. They were heading into Clearwater that afternoon, a supply run that Caleb made every few weeks. Eleanor had a list of things they needed from the general store, and Caleb had business at the land office. But the real purpose of the trip, though no one had said it outright, was to introduce Lena to the town as part of the Turner family. The ride took most of the afternoon, the wagon rattling over the frozen road while Lena sat between Caleb and Eleanor on the bench seat, wrapped in blankets against the cold. The landscape rolled past in shades of white and gray and brown. Snow-covered fields giving way to scattered trees, distant mountains standing sentinel against the sky. Clearwater's not much, Caleb warned as they approached. Maybe 300 people on a good day. But it's got what we need. General store, blacksmith, land office, church. Doc Morrison's there too when he's not off tending to some emergency in the backcountry. The town materialized out of the winter landscape like something from a storybook. A single main street with false-fronted buildings on either side. Smoke rising from chimneys, a few horses tied to hitching posts. It was small, rough around the edges, but it had the solid, settled look of a place that intended to last. Caleb pulled the wagon up in front of the general store and helped Eleanor and Lena down. Inside, the store was warm and smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and the mixed scents of merchandise, leather and fabric and soap and tobacco all mingling together. A man stood behind the counter, older, with wire-rimmed spectacles and a shopkeeper's appraising eye. Caleb! Eleanor! Good to see you folks! His gaze shifted to Lena, curious but not unfriendly. And who's this young lady? This is Lena, Eleanor said, her hand finding Lena's shoulder in a gesture that felt both protective and proud. She's staying with us now. Lena, this is Mr. Garrett. He runs the best general store in the territory. Only general store in the territory, far as Clearwater's concerned, Mr. Garrett said with a chuckle. He nodded to Lena. Pleased to meet you, miss. You settling in all right at the Turner place? Yes, sir. Very well, thank you. Good, good. Well, welcome to Clearwater. He turned to Eleanor. Now, what can I get for you today? While Eleanor worked through her list with Mr. Garrett, Caleb headed to the land office, leaving Lena to wander the store's aisles. She ran her fingers over bolts of fabric, marveled at the jars of penny candy, studied the practical tools and household goods with the eye of someone learning what it took to run a frontier home. See anything you like? Eleanor asked, coming up beside her with a basket full of supplies. It's all wonderful, Lena said honestly. So much to choose from. Eleanor smiled and selected a small bag of peppermint sticks from the candy jar. These are Caleb's secret weakness. Don't tell him I told you. She added them to her basket, then paused by the fabric section. We should get material for another dress. Maybe something warmer for winter. What do you think of this wool? She held up a bolt of deep red fabric, soft and substantial. Lena's eyes widened. That's beautiful, but it must be expensive. It's practical, Eleanor corrected, and you need proper winter clothes. We're not skimping on necessities, Lena. Not for family. That word again. Family. Each time someone said it, it felt a little more real, a little less like a dream Lena might wake up from at any moment. They paid for their purchases and loaded them into the wagon, then walked down the street to where Caleb was just emerging from the land office. He had papers in his hand and a thoughtful expression on his face. Everything all right? Eleanor asked. Fine. Just finalizing some boundary agreements with the Henderson place. He tucked the papers into his coat pocket. Thought we might stop by the church before we head back. Pay our respects to Reverend Walsh. Introduce him to Lena. The church was a simple white building at the end of the main street, its steeple pointing toward the gray winter sky. Inside, it was spare but clean, with rows of wooden pews and a pulpit at the front. A man in his 50s was lighting candles, his movements slow and deliberate. Caleb, Eleanor, he greeted them warmly. What brings you to town? Supplies and business, Caleb said. But we wanted you to meet someone. This is Lena Holloway. She's living with us now. Reverend Walsh's eyes, kind behind wire-rimmed glasses similar to Mr. Garrett's, focused on Lena with gentle attention. Lena, what a lovely name. Welcome, child. How are you finding life with the Turners? It's good, sir. They've been very kind to me. More than kind, Eleanor interjected. We're making it official. We want to adopt her properly, legal and binding. Can you help us with that? The Reverend's face broke into a broad smile. Nothing would give me greater pleasure. There are forms, of course, that'll need to go to the territorial office. But I can start the process, serve as witness, and advocate. When were you thinking? Soon as possible, Caleb said firmly. Want everything proper and legal before spring. They spent another half hour with Reverend Walsh discussing the requirements and timeline for the adoption. Lena listened in a daze, still half convinced this was some elaborate dream, but Eleanor's hand stayed on her shoulder the whole time, solid and real, and when they finally left the church, Lena felt like she was floating. That's really happening? She asked as they climbed back into the wagon. The adoption? It's real. Real as anything, Caleb said, snapping the reins to get the horses moving. Come spring, you'll be Lena Turner, legal and proper. How's that sound? Lena couldn't speak around the lump in her throat, so she just nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Eleanor pulled her close, and they rode like that for a while, Lena tucked against Eleanor's side, watching the winter landscape roll past and thinking about names, about belonging, about the strange and wonderful turns a life could take. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Lena could remember. The adoption papers slowly worked their way through the territorial bureaucracy, but in every way that mattered, she was already part of the family. She had responsibilities now. The chickens were hers to tend, and she'd taken over most of the household mending. Caleb had started teaching her to ride properly, not just sitting behind him on the wagon, but actually controlling a horse herself, and though she was still nervous, she was getting better. The neighbors started to hear about the Turners' adopted daughter, and a few came by to meet her. Mrs. Henderson from the adjacent ranch brought a basket of preserves and stayed for tea, chatting with Eleanor about gardening plans for spring while eyeing Lena with friendly curiosity. The Martins, who had a spread 5 miles south, stopped by one Sunday after church with their 3 children, and Lena found herself playing with kids near her own age for the first time in months. You're lucky, Sarah Martin, who was 13, told Lena as they sat on the porch watching the younger children play in the yard. The Turners are good people. My pa says Caleb Turner's word is better than most men's contracts. I know I'm lucky, Lena said softly. I still can't quite believe it's real sometimes. Sarah studied her with the blunt honesty of youth. Where'd you come from? Before the Turners, I mean. Lena gave her the abbreviated version. Parents dead, orphanage, Mrs. Hutchins, the long walk that had ended at the Turner fence line. Sarah listened with wide eyes. That's awful, she said when Lena finished. But kind of brave, too. I don't think I could have walked for days all alone like that. I didn't have much choice, Lena said. It was walk or give up, and I wasn't ready to give up. Well, I'm glad you didn't, Sarah smiled. It'll be nice having another girl around near my age. Most of the kids out here are either too young or too old. Maybe we can be friends? The offer, simple and genuine, made Lena's heart swell. I'd like that. But not everything was easy. There were still nights when Lena woke from nightmares about being cold and hungry and alone. There were moments when she caught herself hoarding food at meals, unable to shake the fear that it might be the last she'd get. There were times when Eleanor or Caleb would reach out to touch her, a hand on her shoulder, a gentle squeeze of encouragement, and she'd flinch before she could stop herself, years of being unwanted making her wary of physical affection. Eleanor noticed, of course. She noticed everything. One evening, after Lena had jerked away from a casual touch, Eleanor sat her down at the kitchen table with 2 cups of tea and a serious expression. Lena, I need you to understand something, she said gently. What happened to you before you came here? The loss, the fear, the uncertainty? That's not your fault. You survived it, and that took tremendous strength. But you're safe now. You don't have to keep your guard up all the time. I know that, Lena said, staring into her tea. Up here I know it. She tapped her head. But sometimes my body doesn't believe it yet. That's normal. That makes sense. Eleanor reached across the table, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. Healing takes time. Trust takes time. We're not going anywhere, Lena. We're not going to change our minds. We're not going to send you away. You can take all the time you need to really believe that. Lena looked at Eleanor's outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly placed her own in it. Eleanor's fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. I'm trying, Lena whispered. I know you are, and you're doing beautifully. Eleanor squeezed her hand gently. Just remember, family means you don't have to try so hard all the time. Family means you can relax, make mistakes, be imperfect. We'll love you anyway. The word love hit Lena like a thunderbolt. Eleanor had said it so casually, as if it were obvious, as if it were already established fact. We'll love you anyway, present tense, active, real. You love me? Lena's voice came out small, disbelieving. Eleanor's eyes went soft. Oh, sweetheart, of course we do. Did you think we'd go through all this, the adoption, making you part of our lives, if we didn't love you? I thought maybe you felt sorry for me, or needed the help around the ranch, or just wanted to do something good. The words tumbled out in a rush. I didn't think... how could you love me? You barely know me. I know enough. Eleanor came around the table and pulled Lena into a hug, and this time Lena didn't flinch away. I know you're brave and hardworking and kind. I know you've survived things that would break most people. I know that when you smile, really smile, not that careful, polite smile you use when you're not sure of yourself, your whole face lights up. I know you hum when you're concentrating on mending, the same 3 bars of a song over and over. I know you're gentle with the chickens and patient with the horses, and that you always make sure Caleb's coffee cup is full before your own. Eleanor pulled back to look Lena in the eyes. I know you're the daughter we hoped for, and I love you. So does Caleb, even if he's not as good at saying it out loud. That's just truth, Lena. Pure and simple. Lena broke then, really broke, in a way she hadn't since that first night. She cried into Eleanor's shoulder while Eleanor held her and stroked her hair and murmured reassurances. She cried for her lost parents, for the child she'd been who'd believed love was simple and permanent. She cried for all the lonely months when she'd convinced herself that love was something she'd have to live without, and she cried with relief that she'd been wrong, that love had found her again in this unexpected place with these unexpected people. When the storm passed and Lena could breathe again, Eleanor wiped her face with the corner of her apron and smiled. "Feel better?" "Yeah," Lena said, and realized it was true. Something heavy had lifted from her chest, some burden she hadn't fully known she was carrying. "Yeah, I do." "Good. Now, how about we make some cookies? I've been craving molasses cookies all week, and I think we've got everything we need." They spent the rest of the evening baking, flour dusting their aprons, and laughter filling the kitchen. When Caleb came in from the barn, he found them pulling the last tray from the oven, and his eyes crinkled with one of his rare smiles. "Smells good in here," he said, hanging up his coat. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Eleanor said cheerfully. "Just felt like baking with my daughter." The word, daughter, hung in the air for a moment. Caleb's eyes found Lena's, and something passed between them, an understanding, an acknowledgement. He nodded slowly. "Well, your daughter did a fine job with the horses this afternoon," he said, accepting a warm cookie from Eleanor. "She's got good hands, gentle but firm. They trust her." The praise coming from Caleb, who was sparing with compliments, made Lena glow. "Thank you. I've been practicing what you taught me." "It shows." He took another cookie, chewing thoughtfully. "Speaking of which, I've been thinking. Spring's coming on in a few months, and will be calving season. I'm going to need help checking on the herd, making sure the new calves and their mothers are all right. Think you're up for that?" Lena straightened, understanding the significance of what he was offering. Real responsibility, important work, trust that she could handle it. "Yes, sir. I'm up for it." "Good. We'll start going over what to look for, what the warning signs are when a birth goes wrong. It's important work, Lena. Lives depend on it." "I understand. I won't let you down." Caleb's expression softened just slightly. "I know you won't." That night, lying in bed in her room, permanently hers, Lena stared at the ceiling and thought about the strange journey that had brought her here. 2 months ago, she'd been collapsing beside a fence post, prepared to die in the snow. Now she was warm and safe and loved, with a family who wanted her, work that mattered, and a future that stretched out before her full of possibility instead of despair. She thought about her mother, wondered if somehow she knew, if she could see Lena now and approve of the Turners, of this new life. She thought about her father too, gruff and practical, who would have liked Caleb's no-nonsense approach to ranching. She thought about Mrs. Hutchins, kind but overwhelmed, who tried her best but hadn't been strong enough to weather the frontier's harsh realities. And she thought about Caleb's question, the one that had changed everything. "Did you eat today?" 4 simple words that had saved her life, 4 words that had led to this moment, this home, this family. 4 words that had shown her that kindness still existed in the world, that good people still helped strangers, that hope was not a foolish dream, but a real and lasting possibility. Outside, an owl called in the darkness. The wind rattled the window in its frame, but the house was solid, the warmth contained. Downstairs, she could hear Caleb banking the fire for the night, Eleanor's soft voice saying something that made him chuckle. The sounds of home, of family, of permanence. Lena pulled the quilt up to her chin, the quilt Eleanor had made for her, a wedding ring pattern in blues and greens that Eleanor said brought out the color of her eyes, and let herself relax into the mattress. Tomorrow she'd wake and feed the chickens and help with breakfast and continue learning everything she needed to know about being a rancher's daughter. Tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, stretching forward into a future that finally felt secure. She was Lena Holloway now, but soon she'd be Lena Turner. She had a mother and father again, different from her birth parents, but no less real. She had work and purpose and the knowledge that she mattered, that her presence made a difference. She had, against all odds and all expectations, found her way home. The tears that came this time were different from all the others. Not grief or fear or even relief, but simple gratitude. Gratitude for frozen fence posts and strangers with kind eyes. Gratitude for second chances and new beginnings. Gratitude for the miracle of being found when she'd been lost, of being chosen when she'd felt unwanted. Gratitude for family. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, and for the first time in years, she slept the whole night through without nightmares, secure in the knowledge that when she woke, she'd still be home. Winter began its slow retreat in early March, though the Wyoming Territory didn't surrender to spring easily. The snow melted in fits and starts, revealing patches of brown grass that would green up once the ground truly thawed. Ice broke up in the creek with sounds like gunshots echoing across the valley. The cattle, sensing the change in seasons, grew restless in their winter pastures, ready for fresh grazing. And Lena Turner, officially, legally Lena Turner, as of 2 weeks ago when the papers had finally come through, stood in the barn with Caleb, learning to read the signs of impending birth in a heifer who'd been showing distress all morning. "See how she's separated herself from the herd?" Caleb pointed through the barn door to where the young cow stood alone near the fence line, her sides heaving. "That's instinct. They find a quiet place when their time comes. And look at her tail. See how she keeps lifting it?" Lena nodded, committing every detail to memory. This was her 4th calving season lesson, and Caleb had been thorough, patient, making sure she understood not just what to do, but why. "How long before she delivers?" "Could be an hour, could be 6. First-time mothers are unpredictable." Caleb grabbed a coil of rope from the wall. "We'll keep watch, make sure things progress normally. Most times nature handles it fine on its own, but when it doesn't, you need to be ready to act fast." They moved closer to the heifer, giving her space but staying near enough to intervene if needed. The animal's breathing had quickened, her whole body tensing with contractions. Lena watched, fascinated and a little frightened by the raw power of it, the ancient process that had been repeating itself since the beginning of time. "You scared?" Caleb asked quietly. "A little," Lena admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I don't know what to do?" "That's why I'm here. That's why we've been practicing." He rested a hand briefly on her shoulder. "Fear's natural, Lena. Even good. Keeps you sharp, makes you pay attention. The key is not letting it paralyze you. When the moment comes, you trust your training and you act. Understand?" "I understand." They waited together in the cold morning air, watching the heifer pace and low, and finally, as the sun climbed higher, begin the hard work of pushing new life into the world. The calf appeared in stages, first the nose and front hooves, then the head, slick and dark. The mother strained and rested, her instincts guiding her through the process. "It's coming normal," Caleb murmured. "Front presentation, that's good. Just need to make sure she can finish the job." But as the calf's shoulders emerged, the heifer seemed to lose strength. She stood trembling, unable to complete the final pushes, and the calf hung half-born, vulnerable and struggling for breath. "She's tiring out," Caleb said, already moving forward. "Lena, grab that rope. We're going to have to help." Lena's hands shook as she brought him the rope, but she steadied them through force of will. This was what Caleb had prepared her for, the moment when human intervention meant the difference between life and death. "Loop it around the calf's front legs, just above the hooves," Caleb instructed. "Not too tight, but secure. When she contracts again, we'll pull with her, help ease the calf out." Lena did as he said, her fingers working quickly despite her nervousness. The calf's legs were warm and wet beneath her hands, and she could feel the animal's heartbeat, rapid and strong. She got the rope secure and stepped back beside Caleb. "On the next contraction," he said, "steady pressure, don't jerk. We're helping, not forcing. Ready?" "Ready." The heifer's body tensed, and together they pulled, firm, steady, working with the natural rhythm of birth. The calf's shoulders cleared, then the rest of the body came in a rush, and suddenly there was a wet, gangly creature lying in the straw, chest heaving as it took its first breaths of Wyoming air. "Well done," Caleb said, genuine approval in his voice. "Now step back, let Mama do her work." The heifer, exhausted but driven by instinct, turned immediately to her calf. She began licking it vigorously, cleaning it, stimulating it, making the low sounds that Lena had learned meant bonding, attachment, the beginning of recognition between mother and child. Within minutes, the calf was trying to stand on legs that didn't quite work yet, falling and trying again with the determination of all young things fighting for survival. Lena watched with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty and brutality of it, by the miracle of new life emerging from struggle and pain and the fierce love of a mother for her young. "Every time," Caleb said softly, and Lena realized his eyes were bright too. "Every single time it gets me. Doesn't matter how many calves I've seen born, Each one feels like a gift. They stayed until the calf was nursing, until both mother and baby seemed stable and strong. Then they walked back to the house together, the morning well advanced now, the smell of Eleanor's cooking drifting from the kitchen. "You did good today," Caleb said as they approached the porch. "Kept your head, followed instructions, acted when you needed to. I'm proud of you, Lena." The words, so rarely offered but always genuine when they came, made Lena's heart swell. "Thank you for teaching me, for trusting me to help. You're part of this ranch now, part of this family. Of course I trust you." He paused at the door, his weathered hand on the frame. "Your mama and papa, they'd be proud too, of the young woman you're becoming. I hope you know that." Lena nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Caleb gave her shoulder a brief squeeze and went inside, leaving her on the porch for a moment to collect herself. The view from the porch had become dear to her over these months, the sweep of pasture land, the distant mountains still capped with snow, the sturdy barn and outbuildings that spoke of hard work and careful maintenance. This was her land now, her home, her future. She was no longer Lena Holloway the orphan, the charity case, the girl no one wanted. She was Lena Turner, daughter, rancher, part of something bigger than herself. "Lena," Eleanor's voice called from inside. "Come eat before this food gets cold." She went into the warmth and the smell of breakfast and the sound of Eleanor humming while she worked. The kitchen table was set for 3, as it had been every morning for months now, and Caleb was already seated, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. "New calf this morning," he told Eleanor as Lena took her seat. "Heifer needed some help, but Lena handled it well." "Of course she did." Eleanor set plates in front of them, eggs and bacon and fresh biscuits with honey. "Our girl's capable. I've known that from the start." Our girl. The casual possessive warmed Lena from the inside out. She ate her breakfast listening to Eleanor and Caleb discuss the day's tasks, adding her own observations when asked, feeling competent and valued and home. After breakfast, Eleanor announced they'd be making the trip to Clearwater for Sunday services. "It's been too long since we've been to church," she said, already pulling out her good dress to air. "And I want people to see you properly settled, Lena. Want them to know you're family, official, and recognized." Lena understood what Eleanor wasn't saying, that there would be gossip, questions, perhaps even judgment about the Turners taking in an orphan girl. Small communities thrived on talk, and every new development was fodder for discussion. But Eleanor wasn't the type to hide or apologize. She wanted to present Lena to Clearwater society with pride, to make clear that the Turner family had grown by choice and joy. They dressed in their Sunday best, Lena in a new dress Eleanor had made from deep green wool with a white collar and careful stitching at the cuffs. Eleanor pinned Lena's hair up in a style that made her look older, more grown up, then stood back to assess her work. "Beautiful," she declared. "You look like a proper young lady." Lena studied herself in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the girl who stared back. Gone was the half-starved waif in torn clothes. In her place stood someone clean and healthy and cared for, someone who belonged. The ride to Clearwater was pleasant, despite the muddy roads. Spring had turned the landscape green almost overnight, and wildflowers were beginning to appear in sheltered spots. Caleb drove the wagon while Eleanor and Lena sat together in back, wrapped in shawls against the lingering chill. The church was fuller than Lena had seen it before, the pews crowded with families dressed in their Sunday clothes. Heads turned when the Turners entered, eyes curious and assessing as they took in Lena between Caleb and Eleanor. She felt the weight of those stares, the unspoken questions, but Eleanor's hand found hers and squeezed, lending courage. They took their usual pew near the middle, and Reverend Walsh smiled warmly at them from the pulpit. The service proceeded with familiar rhythms, hymns and prayers, and a sermon about new beginnings that felt pointed, meant for Lena even though the Reverend addressed the whole congregation. "Spring is a time of renewal," he said, his voice carrying to the rafters. "A time when what seemed dead and frozen comes back to life. A time when new growth emerges from old ground. We are all of us capable of such renewal, of such transformation. We need only be open to it, to trust that what seems impossible might yet come to pass through faith and the kindness of others." After the service, people gathered in the churchyard to socialize. Eleanor steered Lena through the crowd, introducing her to neighbors and acquaintances, making sure everyone understood that Lena was daughter now, not Charity. "This is Lena Turner," she said again and again, the pride in her voice unmistakable. "She's been such a blessing to us. We can't imagine our lives without her now." Most people were kind, offering congratulations and welcome. Mrs. Garrett from the general store invited Lena to a quilting circle she was organizing for young ladies. Mr. Henderson, the neighboring rancher, told Caleb he was glad to see the Turner place would have someone to inherit it, someone to carry on the work. But there were others whose smiles didn't quite reach their eyes, whose questions had an edge to them. Mrs. Colton, a sharp-faced woman married to the bank manager, looked Lena up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "How fortunate for you," she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "To land on your feet after such unfortunate circumstances. I do hope you appreciate what the Turners have done for you." "I do, ma'am," Lena said quietly, feeling Eleanor stiffen beside her. "It's quite unusual, you know, taking in a child of uncertain background. One never knows what habits or tendencies might have been formed in an orphanage." Mrs. Colton sniffed delicately. "I certainly hope you prove worthy of their generosity." "That's enough, Margaret." Eleanor's voice was ice over steel. "Lena's background is perfectly known. She's the daughter of good, hard-working parents who died of fever. She's been through trials that would break most adults, and she's emerged stronger for it. We're the fortunate ones to have her in our lives." Mrs. Colton's eyes narrowed. "Well, I'm sure you know best, Eleanor, though taking in strays is always a risk." "She's not a stray. She's our daughter." Eleanor's grip on Lena's hand tightened. "And if you can't be respectful, then we have nothing more to say to each other." She turned and led Lena away, her back rigid with anger. Caleb, who'd witnessed the exchange from a few feet away, fell into step beside them. "That woman has a tongue like a rattlesnake," he muttered. "Always has. Pay her no mind, Lena. Her opinion doesn't matter." But it did matter, Lena thought. Not Mrs. Colton specifically, but what she represented, the doubt, the judgment, the whispered questions about whether Lena was good enough, worthy enough, trustworthy enough. She thought those voices were behind her, silenced by the official adoption and the Turners' acceptance. But they were still there, waiting to undermine her newfound security. "Hey." Eleanor stopped and turned Lena to face her. "Look at me. What that woman said, what anyone says, it doesn't change the truth. You are our daughter. You are worthy. You are wanted. Anyone who can't see that has a problem with their vision, not with you. Understand?" Lena nodded, blinking back tears. "I understand. It just hurts, hearing things like that." "I know it does, and I'm sorry you had to hear it." Eleanor pulled her into a quick, fierce hug. "But you're strong enough to weather it. We all are. Let small-minded people talk. We know the truth." On the ride home, Lena was quiet, processing the day's events. The joy of the church service, the warmth of most people's welcome, the sting of Mrs. Colton's words, it all swirled together in her mind, leaving her unsettled. "You're awful quiet back there," Caleb observed, glancing over his shoulder. "Just thinking," Lena said. "About what that fool woman said?" He shook his head. "Lena, there's always going to be people who need to tear others down to make themselves feel bigger. That's their failing, not yours. You just keep being who you are, hardworking, honest, kind. Let your character speak for itself." "But what if she's right?" The question burst out before Lena could stop it. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I let you down somehow, prove that you shouldn't have taken a chance on me?" Eleanor twisted in her seat to look back at Lena, her face soft with understanding. "Oh, sweetheart, you're going to make mistakes. We all do. You're going to have hard days and frustrations and moments when you don't live up to your own expectations. That's called being human, but none of that will make us love you less or regret having you as our daughter. Family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up for each other, especially when things are hard. Besides," Caleb added, "you've already proven yourself 100 times over. The way you work, the way you learn, the way you've adapted to ranch life. I couldn't ask for better. So stop worrying about being good enough. You already are." Their words soothed some of the anxiety, but Lena knew it would take time to fully believe them, to quiet the voice of doubt that Mrs. Colton had amplified. She leaned back against the wagon bed, watching the sky turn colors as afternoon faded toward evening, and tried to focus on the good, on family and home and belonging. The weeks that followed brought the full rush of spring work. Calving continued in earnest, and Lena found herself spending long hours in the pastures with Caleb, checking on new mothers and their babies, learning to spot problems before they became crises. She gained confidence with each successful birth, each calf that stood and nursed and grew strong. Eleanor taught her to plant the kitchen garden, showing her how to prepare the soil, when to plant each type of seed, how to space the rows for maximum yield. Together they set out tomatoes and beans and squash, carrots and radishes and lettuce. Lena loved the feel of dirt under her fingernails, the hope inherent in pushing seeds into dark earth and trusting they'd grow. My mama used to say gardening was an act of faith, Lena said one afternoon as they worked side by side. You put the seeds in the ground and believe they'll become something, even though you can't see them working beneath the surface. Your mama was a wise woman, Eleanor said, tamping soil around a tomato seedling. And she was right, about gardening and about life. Sometimes we have to trust the process, even when we can't see the results yet. Sarah Martin became a regular visitor, riding over on her family's old mare to spend afternoons with Lena. They'd work together on whatever task needed doing, then sit on the porch with glasses of cold well water and talk about everything and nothing, about books they'd read, dreams they had, the peculiar challenges of being young women on the frontier. My ma wants me to learn proper manners so I can attract a good husband, Sarah confided one day, rolling her eyes. Like that's the only thing that matters. I want to run a ranch someday, be a real partner to whoever I marry, not just keep house and have babies. Eleanor does both, Lena pointed out. She keeps the household running, but she also knows as much about the ranch as Caleb does. She makes decisions, handles money, negotiates with suppliers. She's a full partner. That's what I want, Sarah said fervently. A marriage like that, where both people respect each other, where the woman isn't just decorative or dutiful. They talked about the future, about what their lives might hold, and Lena realized with surprise that for the first time since her parents died, she could actually imagine a future. Not just survival, not just getting through one day at a time, but an actual life with purpose and possibility. One evening in late April, after a particularly long day of fence mending, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Caleb was whittling a piece of wood into the shape of a horse, his hands moving with practiced ease. Eleanor was snapping beans for tomorrow's dinner, the rhythmic sound peaceful and domestic. Lena sat between them, mending one of Caleb's shirts, her stitches neat and even. You know what I realized today? Eleanor said suddenly. We've been a family for almost 5 months now. 5 months since Caleb found you by that fence post. Lena looked up from her mending, struck by the passage of time. 5 months. It felt like both forever and no time at all. It's hard to believe it's been that long. Feels like I've always been here. Feels that way to us too, Caleb said, not looking up from his whittling. Like you've always been part of the picture, part of the plan. I was thinking, Eleanor continued, that we should celebrate. Nothing fancy, just us and maybe a few neighbors. Acknowledge this new chapter properly. What kind of celebration? Lena asked. A party? A spring gathering? We can invite the Martins, the Hendersons, some folks from church, have a proper meal, some music maybe, show everyone that the Turner family is thriving. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with planning. What do you think? Lena felt a flutter of nervousness at the idea of being the center of attention, but also a warmth at the thought of marking this milestone. I think it sounds wonderful. Then it's settled, Eleanor declared. We'll have it in 2 weeks. Give me time to prepare. Lena, you can help me plan the menu. Caleb, you'll need to make sure the yard is presentable. Caleb grunted, which they both knew meant agreement. He held up his whittling, a small wooden horse, surprisingly detailed. This is for you, he said, handing it to Lena. Been working on it for a while. Thought you might like it. Lena took the carving carefully, running her fingers over the smooth wood. It was beautiful. The horse caught mid-stride, head up, mane flowing. The kind of gift that took time and thought and care. It's beautiful, she whispered. Thank you, Caleb. You're welcome. He picked up another piece of wood, already starting the next project. Figured you needed something special, something just yours. Mark this time in your life. Lena held the wooden horse, feeling its weight in her palm, and thought about markers and memories, about the moments that defined a life. 5 months ago, she'd been dying by a fence post. Now she sat on a porch with parents who loved her, planning parties and futures and all the ordinary, extraordinary things that made up a family. The preparation for the gathering consumed the next 2 weeks. Eleanor threw herself into planning with characteristic enthusiasm, deciding on menu items and decorations and entertainment. Lena helped with everything, baking pies and cakes, cleaning the house until it gleamed, helping Caleb repair the porch steps and whitewash the fence around the yard. The day of the party dawned clear and warm, one of those perfect spring days that seemed designed for celebration. By mid-morning, guests began arriving. The Martins with their 3 children, the Hendersons with a basket of early strawberries, neighbors from surrounding ranches that Lena had met only briefly at church. Reverend Walsh came with his wife, a kind woman who immediately joined Eleanor in the kitchen. Even Mr. and Mrs. Garrett from the general store made the trip, bringing penny candy for the younger children and a beautiful hair ribbon for Lena. "For the guest of honor," Mrs. Garrett said with a warm smile. "Every young lady needs something pretty." The yard filled with people, with conversation and laughter and the sounds of community. Tables had been set up outside, laden with food, roasted chicken and beef, fresh bread, vegetables from early gardens, pies and cakes and cookies. It was more food than Lena had seen in one place in years, and the abundance of it, the generosity, made her throat tight with emotion. Sarah found her in the crowd and pulled her aside. "This is amazing," she said, eyes wide. "Look at everyone who came. They're all here for you, Lena, for your family." Lena looked around at the gathered neighbors, at the children playing chase in the yard, at the adults talking and laughing and enjoying the unseasonably perfect weather. These were her people now, her community. The thought was both overwhelming and wonderful. As the afternoon wore on, Reverend Walsh called for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, turning toward where he stood on the porch with Caleb and Eleanor flanking him. "Friends and neighbors," he said, his voice carrying across the yard, "we're gathered here today to celebrate a family, the Turner family, newly expanded and thoroughly blessed. 5 months ago, Caleb and Eleanor made the decision to open their home and hearts to a child in need. Today, we acknowledge that decision and the beautiful family that has resulted from it." He gestured to Lena, and Eleanor reached down to take her hand, drawing her up onto the porch. Lena's face burned with attention, but she forced herself to stand tall, to meet the eyes of the people gathered below. "Lena Turner," the Reverend continued, "has proven herself a worthy addition to our community. She works hard, shows respect, and embodies the frontier spirit that makes this territory strong. Caleb and Eleanor, you've done a fine thing, and we're all richer for it." There was applause, genuine and warm, and Lena felt tears prick her eyes. Eleanor squeezed her hand, and Caleb's hand came to rest on her shoulder, both of them grounding her, supporting her, claiming her as theirs in front of everyone who mattered. "Thank you," Lena managed to say, her voice shaking slightly. "Thank you all for welcoming me, for accepting me. I know I'm lucky, blessed, to have found this family, this home. I promise to honor it, to work hard, to be worthy of it." "You already are worthy," someone called out. "Mr. Henderson," she thought. "Anyone can see that?" There was more applause, and then the party resumed with renewed energy. Someone brought out a fiddle and began playing, and before long people were dancing in the yard, their feet kicking up small clouds of dust that glowed golden in the late afternoon sun. Lena found herself swept into the celebration, dancing with Caleb and then Eleanor and then various neighbors who wanted to welcome her properly. Her feet ached and her face hurt from smiling, but it was the good kind of pain, the kind that came from joy rather than suffering. As evening approached and guests began to depart, as the yard slowly emptied and quiet descended once more, Lena helped Eleanor gather dishes and clean up. They worked in companionable silence, both of them tired but content. "Today was perfect," Lena said as they washed the last of the serving platters. "Thank you for planning it, for wanting to celebrate." "It was my pleasure," Eleanor said, bumping her shoulder against Lena's. "You deserve to be celebrated, sweetheart. You deserve to know how valued you are." "I do know, because of you and Caleb. You've given me everything." Eleanor set down the dish she was washing and pulled Lena into a soapy hug. You've given us just as much. A purpose, a future, a daughter to love and raise and watch grow into an extraordinary woman. That's not a small thing, Lena. That's everything. They finished the cleanup and joined Caleb on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The air smelled of grass and wood smoke and the lingering sweetness of dessert. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and closer in, the cattle lowed softly in their pasture. "Good day," Caleb said finally, breaking the peaceful silence. "Good day," Eleanor agreed. Lena didn't say anything, just sat between her parents and let the contentment wash over her. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the loss and fear and desperate walking through snow. She thought about a frozen fence post and a stranger's question. She thought about all the small kindnesses and large decisions that had led to this moment, to this family, to this home. And she thought about the future, about all the days and months and years stretching ahead, full of work and challenge and the ordinary miracles of belonging. She was Lena Turner now, daughter, rancher, part of something bigger and better than she'd ever imagined possible. The girl who'd collapsed by the fence post, ready to give up, would hardly recognize her now. That girl had been surviving. This girl, this young woman, was living. The summer that followed brought a heat that seemed to rise from the earth itself, turning the Wyoming grasslands golden and making the work harder, but somehow more satisfying. Lena had grown another inch, Eleanor noted with pleasure as she let down the hems on Lena's dresses, and her arms had developed the lean strength that came from daily ranch work. She was 13 now, no longer the half-starved child who'd collapsed by a fence post, but a capable young woman who could handle a horse, deliver a calf, and keep a household running when Eleanor took sick with a summer cold. It was on one of those blazing August afternoons, with Lena in the garden pulling weeds and Caleb off checking the water levels in the creek, that a wagon came up the road toward the house. Lena straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, trying to make out who it might be. They weren't expecting visitors, and the formal way the wagon approached, slow and deliberate, suggested official business rather than a neighborly call. As it drew closer, Lena's stomach dropped. She recognized the man driving, Mr. Peterson from the territorial office in Cheyenne, the same man who'd processed her adoption papers. Beside him sat a woman Lena didn't know, severe-looking in a dark dress despite the heat, her hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her face. Eleanor emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes narrowing as she took in their unexpected guests. "Mr. Peterson," she called as the wagon pulled to a stop. "This is a surprise. What brings you all the way out here?" Peterson climbed down from the wagon, his expression uncomfortable. "Mrs. Turner, is your husband about?" "He's checking the creek. Should be back shortly." Eleanor's voice had taken on a careful neutrality that Lena recognized as protective. "What's this about?" The woman descended from the wagon with Peterson's help, and up close Lena could see she was younger than she'd first appeared, maybe 40, with pale eyes that took in everything and revealed nothing. "I'm Mrs. Whitmore," she said crisply, "from the Territorial Children's Welfare Society. We've had some concerns brought to our attention regarding the placement of Lena Holloway." "Lena Turner," Eleanor corrected sharply. "Her adoption was finalized months ago, legal and binding." "Yes, well, that's precisely what we need to discuss." Mrs. Whitmore's gaze found Lena standing in the garden, and something in that look made Lena's skin crawl. "Perhaps we should speak inside?" "Lena stays with us," Eleanor said firmly. "Whatever you have to say can be said in front of her. She's part of this family." Mrs. Whitmore's lips thinned with disapproval, but she nodded. "Very well. We've received a complaint from a concerned citizen." "Let me guess," Eleanor interrupted. "Margaret Colton." Peterson shifted uncomfortably, which was answer enough. Mrs. Whitmore continued as if Eleanor hadn't spoken. "The complaint suggests that the child was taken in under questionable circumstances, that proper procedures may not have been followed, and that the home situation should be evaluated to ensure it meets appropriate standards." "That's ridiculous," Eleanor said, her voice rising. "Every procedure was followed exactly. We have all the papers, all the documentation. You processed them yourself, Mr. Peterson." "I know, Mrs. Turner, and I tried to explain that to Mrs. Whitmore, but she insisted on coming out to conduct a home inspection." Peterson looked miserable. It's standard procedure when a formal complaint is filed. Lena felt frozen in place, her hands still clutching the weeds she'd pulled, dirt under her fingernails and fear blooming in her chest. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when everything had finally settled into place. Not when she'd finally found home. "Lena," Eleanor said gently. "Come here, sweetheart." Lena dropped the weeds and walked slowly toward the house, her legs feeling unsteady. Eleanor's arm came around her shoulders immediately, pulling her close in a gesture that was both comfort and claim. Mrs. Whitmore pulled out a notebook and began walking around the yard, making notes with sharp, efficient movements. She peered into the barn, examined the chicken coop, ran a gloved finger along the porch railing, checking for dust. Her expression gave nothing away, but every action felt like judgment, like looking for flaws to exploit. "The child appears adequately fed and clothed," she said, making a note, "though she's engaged in manual labor that seems rather strenuous for a girl her age." "She's helping with the garden," Eleanor said tightly, "which she does by choice because she likes being useful. There's nothing inappropriate about teaching a child how to grow food." Another note. "And her education? Is she attending school?" "The nearest school is in Clearwater, 15 miles away. We teach her at home, reading, writing, arithmetic, history. She's well educated for her age." Mrs. Whitmore looked unconvinced. She turned to Lena directly, and her pale eyes were clinical, assessing. "Child, I need you to answer honestly. Are you happy here? Do the Turners treat you well?" Lena felt Eleanor tense beside her, but she forced herself to meet Mrs. Whitmore's gaze steadily. "Yes, ma'am. Very well. They're my family. This is my home." "And do they require you to work beyond what's reasonable? Make you do things you don't want to do?" "They require me to contribute to the household, same as any family member would," Lena said carefully. "I feed chickens, help with cooking and cleaning, assist with ranch work when needed. Nothing different than any other child on a frontier ranch would do." "I see." More notes. "And you're allowed appropriate rest, meals, personal time?" "Yes, ma'am. More than I had before they took me in." Lena felt her temper starting to rise despite her fear. "Before the Turners found me, I was starving and freezing and alone. They saved my life. They gave me a home, a family, a future. I don't understand why anyone would question that." "Because, child, there are unfortunately people who take in orphans for the wrong reasons, free labor, government stipends, or worse." Mrs. Whitmore's tone softened slightly, though her expression remained stern. "It's my job to ensure you're being properly cared for, not exploited." The sound of hooves interrupted them, and Caleb appeared around the barn on his horse, his face darkening as he took in the scene. He dismounted quickly and strode toward them, and even Mrs. Whitmore seemed to shrink slightly at the sight of his anger. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Peterson stepped forward. "Mr. Turner, I apologize for the intrusion. This is Mrs. Whitmore from the Territorial Children's Welfare Society. There's been a complaint filed regarding Lena's placement, and she's here to conduct an inspection." "A complaint?" Caleb's voice was dangerously quiet. "From Margaret Colton, I'd wager." "The source is confidential," Mrs. Whitmore said stiffly, "but the complaint must be investigated regardless." "Fine. Investigate." Caleb crossed his arms. "Look at anything you want. Talk to anyone you need to. You'll find that Lena is healthy, well-fed, well-clothed, educated, and loved. You'll find that she's not exploited or mistreated in any way. You'll find that she's exactly what she should be, a cherished daughter in a good home." Mrs. Whitmore spent the next hour doing exactly that. She inspected the house from top to bottom, examined Lena's room and belongings, questioned all three of them separately and together. She reviewed the adoption papers, the financial records that proved the Turners could support a child, even the medical documentation showing Lena had gained 20 pounds and 3 inches since arriving at the ranch. Through it all, Lena felt like she was being dissected, every aspect of her life examined and judged by this stranger who held her future in her hands. She answered questions with as much composure as she could manage, but inside she was screaming. This wasn't fair. This wasn't right. She'd finally found where she belonged, and now someone was trying to take it away based on nothing more than spite and prejudice. Finally, as the afternoon shadows grew long, Mrs. Whitmore closed her notebook and faced the three of them where they stood together on the porch. Her expression was unreadable, and Lena felt Eleanor's hand find hers and squeeze tight. "I've completed my inspection," Mrs. Whitmore said formally, "and I must say, this is one of the more thorough attempts to discredit a legitimate adoption that I've encountered. The complaint alleged neglect and exploitation. What I found is a well-run household, a healthy and educated child, and a family that clearly cares for one another." The relief that flooded through Lena was so intense it made her dizzy. Eleanor's grip on her hand tightened even more, and Caleb's hand came to rest on her shoulder, steady and grounding. "So you'll be filing a positive report?" Eleanor asked, her voice carefully controlled. "I will, and I'll be having some words with certain parties about filing frivolous complaints that waste the territory's resources." Mrs. Whitmore's expression softened just slightly as she looked at Lena. "You're a fortunate girl to have found such a home. I hope you appreciate it." "I do, ma'am," Lena said quietly, "every single day." Mrs. Whitmore nodded and climbed back into the wagon beside Peterson, who looked relieved that the ordeal was over. As they drove away, the three Turners stood together on the porch, watching until the wagon disappeared from sight. Then Eleanor pulled Lena into a fierce hug, and Lena felt her mother trembling with released tension. "That woman," Eleanor said shakily, "that horrible, spiteful woman. How dare she try to take you from us?" "She didn't succeed," Caleb said grimly, "and she won't. We've got the law on our side, got proof of proper care, got everything documented and legal. No one's taking Lena anywhere." But the incident had shaken something loose in Lena, some deep fear she'd been trying to ignore. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop thinking about how quickly security could be threatened, how fragile belonging really was. One complaint from a bitter woman, and suddenly everything had been at risk. She must have been quieter than usual the next few days, because Eleanor noticed. She always noticed. One afternoon, as they worked together preserving tomatoes from the garden, Eleanor set down her knife and turned to Lena with concern in her eyes. "Talk to me, sweetheart. What's going on in that head of yours?" Lena tried to find the words for the anxiety that had been gnawing at her since Mrs. Whitmore's visit. What if she comes back? What if Mrs. Colton makes another complaint or someone else decides we're not a proper family? What if— "Stop." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. She pulled off her apron and led Lena to the kitchen table, sitting them both down. "Listen to me. What happened with Mrs. Whitmore was frightening, I know. It threatened your sense of security, made you doubt what we've built here. But it's over now, and the result was positive. The territory officially confirmed that you're exactly where you should be." "But it could happen again," Lena whispered. "It could. Life doesn't come with guarantees, Lena. Bad things can happen to good people. We can lose what we love." Eleanor's eyes were bright with emotion. "But we can't live in fear of what might happen. We have to live in the present, in the truth we know right now. And the truth is that you are our daughter, legally and in every way that matters. You belong here. No bitter woman's complaint is going to change that." "I'm scared," Lena admitted. "I'm scared of losing this, losing you and Caleb, losing home." "I know, and that's natural. You've lost so much already. But Lena, you have to trust that not everything good gets taken away. Sometimes good things last. Sometimes families stay together. Sometimes home remains home." Eleanor reached across the table and took both of Lena's hands in hers. "We're not going anywhere. We're not changing our minds. You're stuck with us, sweetheart. For better or worse, you're a Turner now, and forever." The words unlocked something in Lena's chest, and the tears came. Not the desperate, grieving tears of before, but cleansing ones that washed away some of the fear. Eleanor held her through it, stroking her hair and murmuring reassurances, and when Lena finally pulled back, she felt lighter somehow, freer. "Thank you," she said softly, "for choosing me, for keeping me, for fighting for me." "Always," Eleanor promised. "Always and always." The summer faded into autumn, and with it came the busy season of harvest in preparation for winter. The garden yielded abundantly, and Lena worked alongside Eleanor to preserve everything they could. canning tomatoes and beans, drying herbs, storing root vegetables in the cellar. Caleb brought in hay for the winter feeding, and Lena helped stack it in the barn, the physical labor satisfying and grounding. Sarah Martin came by one October afternoon with news that made Lena's heart leap. The territory was opening a small school in the church building in Clearwater, just for the winter months when ranch work was lighter. Classes would be held 3 days a week, and several families were planning to board their children in town during the school session. My parents said I could go if I wanted, Sarah said excitedly. Mrs. Walsh, the Reverend's wife, is organizing boarding for the girls. We'd stay at the church house, help with cooking and cleaning in exchange for room and board, and attend classes during the day. What do you think? Would your parents let you come? Lena's immediate instinct was to say no, to stay safe at home where she knew she belonged. But another part of her, the part that remembered her mother's insistence on education, that hungered for knowledge and growth, wanted desperately to say yes. That evening at supper, she brought it up hesitantly. Sarah was telling me about the winter school in Clearwater. Some families are sending their children to board in town for the session. Caleb and Eleanor exchanged one of their wordless conversations. You want to go? Caleb asked. I don't know, Lena admitted. Part of me does. I'd like to learn more, be with other kids my age. But part of me is scared to leave. What if something happens while I'm gone? What if nothing happens and you miss an opportunity to better yourself? Eleanor interrupted gently. Lena, we'd miss you terribly if you went, but we'd never hold you back from education, from experiences that would help you grow. If you want to attend the winter school, we'll support that. It's only 3 days a week, Caleb added. You'd be home for long weekends, and Clearwater's not that far. If you needed us, we could be there in a few hours. Lena thought about it, weighing her fear against her desire for learning. Finally, she nodded slowly. I think I'd like to try, if you're sure you don't mind. We don't mind, Eleanor assured her. We're proud of you for wanting to pursue education. Your mother would be proud too. So it was arranged. Come November, Lena would board in Clearwater with Sarah and 3 other girls, attending classes taught by a young teacher from back east who'd come west seeking adventure. She'd come home Friday evenings and return Monday mornings, balancing education with her responsibilities at the ranch. The night before she left for the first session, Eleanor helped her pack her things into a small trunk, clothes, books, the wooden horse Caleb had carved for her. Lena moved slowly, still not entirely sure she was making the right choice. You can change your mind, Eleanor said softly. No one will think less of you if you decide to stay home. No, Lena said, forcing conviction into her voice. I want to do this. I'm just nervous. That's understandable. New experiences are always a little scary. Eleanor folded a nightgown and placed it in the trunk. But they're also how we grow, how we discover what we're capable of. You're a brave girl, Lena. Braver than you know. The first weeks of school were harder than Lena expected. The academics themselves were fine. She was actually ahead of most students in reading and mathematics, thanks to Eleanor's patient teaching. But being away from home, sleeping in an unfamiliar room, even with Sarah snoring softly in the next bed, eating meals prepared by someone other than Eleanor, it all felt wrong somehow, disorienting. She was homesick in a way she hadn't expected, missing the quiet rhythms of the ranch, the sound of Caleb's boots on the porch in the morning, the smell of Eleanor's bread baking. She missed feeding the chickens, missed the horses, missed the vast open sky unbroken by town buildings. But she stuck it out, determined not to disappoint her parents or prove her fears right. And gradually, something shifted. She began to enjoy the classes, the discussions with other students, the challenge of new ideas. She made friends beyond Sarah, girls from other ranches who understood frontier life, who shared her experiences and dreams. The teacher, Miss Caroline, took a particular interest in Lena, lending her books from her personal collection and encouraging her to write about her experiences. You have a story worth telling, Miss Caroline said one afternoon, after Lena had written an essay about ranch life. Don't underestimate the value of your perspective. When Friday evenings came and Caleb arrived to take her home, Lena found herself eager to share what she'd learned, to tell Eleanor and Caleb about the books she was reading and the ideas she was exploring. They listened with genuine interest, asking questions, encouraging her curiosity. You're blooming, Eleanor said one Sunday morning as they worked together making breakfast. I can see it in you, this new confidence, this intellectual hunger. It's beautiful to watch. I was scared I'd lose home by leaving, Lena admitted. But it's still here when I come back. You're still here. We'll always be here, Eleanor promised. That's what home means. It's the place that remains constant even as you grow and change. It's the foundation you build from. The winter passed in this rhythm. 3 days in town pursuing education, 4 days at home contributing to ranch life. Lena learned to balance both worlds, to be both student and daughter, to embrace growth while staying rooted in family. Spring returned with its usual rush of work and renewal. Lena finished the school session with marks that made Miss Caroline beam with pride and Eleanor tear up with joy. She'd grown again, both physically and in confidence. And when she looked in the mirror now, she saw someone who knew her own worth, someone who'd survived loss and found belonging and wasn't afraid to reach for more. One evening in late May, almost exactly a year after the adoption party, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset. Caleb was reading a farming journal, Eleanor was piecing a quilt, and Lena was writing in the journal Miss Caroline had given her as an end-of-term present. "What are you writing?" Eleanor asked. "Just thinking," Lena said, "about how much has changed in a year, how different I am from the girl who first came here." "You're not that different," Caleb said, looking up from his journal. "You're still brave, still strong, still determined. You've just had the chance to become more fully yourself." "I was thinking about Mrs. Colton's complaint," Lena continued, "about how angry I was at the time, how threatened I felt. But now I realize it actually gave me something important." "What's that?" Eleanor set down her quilting. "Proof that home isn't fragile, that our family isn't going to fall apart at the first challenge. We faced something hard together, and we came through it stronger." Lena looked at her parents, because that's what they were now, fully and completely, not substitutes or replacements, but her parents in every way that mattered. "I'm not scared anymore. Not of losing this, not of the future, not of anything, really. Because I know now that no matter what happens, I have family, I have home, and that's not something anyone can take away." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, and she reached over to squeeze Lena's hand. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. That's exactly right." They sat together in the gathering dusk, three people bound by choice and love and the determination to show up for each other through whatever life brought. The cattle lowed softly in the pasture. A nighthawk called overhead. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the frozen fence post where she'd nearly given up, Caleb's simple question that had changed everything, the slow building of trust and family over months of shared work and life. She thought about her birth parents, gone but not forgotten, whose love had given her the foundation to survive and eventually thrive. She thought about Mrs. Hutchins, who'd tried but couldn't provide what Lena needed. She thought about all the small moments and large decisions that had woven together to create this life, this family, this home. And she thought about the future, about the woman she would become, the life she would build, the challenges she would face and overcome. Whatever came, she would face it as Lena Turner, daughter of Caleb and Eleanor, rancher and student and survivor. She would face it knowing she belonged, knowing she was loved, knowing she had a home to return to no matter how far she roamed. "Thank you," she said softly, and both her parents looked at her. "For stopping, for asking if I'd eaten, for seeing me when I needed to be seen, for giving me a second chance at childhood, at family, at life. Thank you for everything." Caleb's weathered face creased with emotion. "Thank you for trusting us enough to stay, for letting us love you, for being the daughter we didn't know we needed." "You saved each other," Eleanor said, her voice thick with tears. "That's what family does. We save each other, again and again, in small ways and large, and we'll keep doing it for as long as we have." The darkness settled fully around them, but they remained on the porch, reluctant to break the moment. In the house behind them, lamps waited to be lit, supper waited to be prepared. The evening routines of family life waited to resume. But for now, they simply sat together, three souls who'd found each other against the odds, who'd built something lasting and true from loss and loneliness and one simple act of kindness. Lena closed her journal and looked out at the land she'd come to love. the vast Wyoming territory with its harsh beauty and endless sky. This was home, not because it was where she'd been born, but because it was where she'd been chosen, where she'd been wanted, where she'd learned that family wasn't just about blood, but about showing up, about caring, about the daily choice to love and be loved. She was 14 now, no longer a child, but not yet fully grown. She had years ahead of learning and growing, of making mistakes and achieving triumphs, of discovering who she would become. But whatever the future held, she would face it from this foundation of love and belonging. The girl who'd collapsed by the fence post had been looking for survival. The young woman sitting on this porch had found so much more. She'd found purpose and worth, and the knowledge that she mattered. She'd found that sometimes the darkest moments led to the brightest futures. She'd found that one person's kindness could change the entire trajectory of a life. Most of all, she'd found home. Not a place exactly, though this ranch would always be precious to her. But home in the truest sense, people who chose her, who fought for her, who loved her not despite her brokenness, but through it and beyond it. Home in the sound of Eleanor's humming, in the steady presence of Caleb's guidance, in the daily rhythms of work and rest, and shared meals and conversations that mattered. As the stars multiplied overhead and the spring breeze carried the scent of new grass and possibility, Lena Turner smiled. Her story had begun with loss and desperation, but it would continue with hope and determination and the unshakable foundation of family love. And that, she thought, as Eleanor suggested they head inside for supper and Caleb stood to help them both up, was more than she'd ever dared to dream possible on that frozen November day when a stranger had stopped his horse and asked a simple question. "Did you eat today?" 4 words that had saved a life. 4 words that had led to this moment, this family, this future full of promise and potential. 4 words that had proven beyond any doubt that kindness mattered, that people could be good, that hope was worth holding on to even in the darkest times. Lena stood and followed her parents inside into the warmth and light of home, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Because she knew now, with absolute certainty, that no matter what challenges came, she wouldn't face them alone. She had family. She had home. She had love. And that was everything.